Hi, Kayla.
It's nice to see you.
Good to
I always
see
come on here early because I'm so stressed that for some reason, starting at 45 always makes me feel like I'm going to forget about it. So
It's okay. You can mute or whatever. Just put your organization in the chat, and so just who you are and in the chat, so it'll be fine.
I can put it on here too. All right, I'm going to go heat up my tea before we get started. But okay. I hope you're doing well.
I am. Did you get my email today?
Yes, I did. I apologize. Okay. I was in meetings all day long, but that's definitely something we can do. And I'm really excited to connect with them and see what we can provide.
Okay.
Because yeah, I think it's great. Like during this time, finding anyone who has contact with students right on a more regular basis so that they can help support students is going to be so important, just because with kids online learning, they don't have a ton of contact with other trusted adults, so super excited about being able to offer that for them.
Do you all do, I know Jason was saying that there's not necessarily a virtual platform, so you have to do it in person still?
No, they recently came out with, and maybe this is an update I should provide for him as well, but there is an online version that we could utilize.
Okay.
Just dependent on what the needs are of the Boys and Girls Club or where they're at. I'm sure for most people that is more helpful at this moment. But I also know there's aspects of it that people like to still have in person in some ways. I would prefer,
Okay.
distance, but
well, that's good to know. Yeah, that's good to know. And after the meeting, we can talk about it more offline, just about just with some other organizations that might be able to utilize it as well. So
yeah, I mean, we would love to talk to folks and provide this as much as possible, because like I said, if they're still interacting with students, then I would love to be able to support them and empower them to feel like they know how to respond if anything comes up. So for sure.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, thanks.
Hi. Hey, Chandra.
Yes,
Does it look like it's recording?
it is recording.
Yay. Thank you. Okay,
Yeah, as soon as I logged in, it started. So,
perfect.
yep. This was my choice.
Should I do the same one or do you want me to do, I'll show you, my favorite is the dinosaur.
I figured that. That's
It's silly.
what I figured you should do.
Because you know I have a relationship with dinosaurs. Hey, do you want me to co-host in order to let people in?
Sure.
Would that be helpful? Can we
Yes.
have co-hosts on this? You would still be the host.
Yes.
So if this recording ends up on your computer and not on mine, we have to email it to Stephanie and the IT help desk tomorrow.
Okay.
So we'll see where it ends up. It might end up here.
Whose dinosaur is that?
Chandra found these. This is for Kyle because today is his birthday. So I can put these delightful backgrounds into the chat box and people can use them.
Oh, I don't know how to do that, but I like the idea.
We're decorating for Kyle's birthday. There's one more. I think this third one is really pretty. So.
So you just click on it and it goes to your,
If you click on it, well, if you click on it, I guess like for me, I put everything on my desktop, which might not be a good habit. And then I can pull it from my desktop into the Zoom program.
oh, I don't know that. I've never known how to do that, but.
Yeah, I'm not even going to attempt to do that today. I was
Lynn,
singing.
I think I'm going to make you the host.
Do you want me to start the recording over?
No, you don't have to.
Okay, got it. So I can watch for people in the waiting room.
Yep.
And is that a dinosaur on your desk?
It's a birthday surprise for Kyle.
Oh,
Today's his birthday.
oh, okay.
So I should probably, for now, I should show where I am because I am in the Lyle Shields room to make sure to make our meeting fully compliant with the revised Open Meetings Act.
Mm.
So now we're totally legit.
We're legit.
You're not the only one in the building, are you?
No.
Oh, okay. Good.
sometimes I am this late, but there are a lot of people here tonight.
Okay.
I'm not scared.
It's a cold night. I mean, people don't want to do things on a cold night.
That's true. That's
Not in
true.
a government building.
Yeah.
Turned out to be pretty cold today. That was quick.
Yeah,
Mhm.
sure is.
You know, it's not even winter yet.
Hey, don't remind me.
That's right.
That's depressing.
It's close enough to winter.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Susan, Elaine, this is Sue Suter. I'm not on the, I noticed this before in a meeting with you. Wait, am I on mute?
No,
No,
you're not.
Yeah,
We can hear you.
I hear you.
I noticed this before, Elaine. You have a great background.
Oh,
All
thanks.
the books and everything. And it's for real, I can tell.
Yeah, we had to move hundreds of them because the floor was sagging. We had to get the floor raised. So I know these books better than I used to because I've had to box them up and move them and reshelve them. And now they're in alphabetical order and
Oh,
in
whoa.
categories.
Whoa. Man, that scares me.
Yeah,
That kind of organization just scares me.
Oh.
You live in a library?
So you
It's
just
our
get a library
security
card.
blanket. The books are our security blanket.
Well, you might have the best background, but Tom has the best tie.
Well, he does.
Yes, he always makes everybody look underdressed. I'm trying to.
That's right.
What do we need for a quorum?
I think we could get started. I mean, I think, okay, wait, it's 1, 2.
You have a bunch more people coming in. I'm sorry, I held them in the waiting room for a second. There's a chance that in the future for the spring, I might not sit in the Lyle Shields room, but wherever they put me, we'll post it appropriately, so you'll know.
Okay.
But I think you're right that it's, as long as Stephanie's ready and you all are ready, I think Anne's here now.
Yeah. Okay,
Hi,
so
Ann.
let's,
Hi, Ann.
hey, Ann.
Greetings, everyone. I'm going to mute myself for the meeting, but it's good to see everybody.
Yes, good seeing you again.
I think Ann took a great step to make this a shorter meeting.
She sure did. Okay, let's call to order. So Stephanie, are you ready to do roll call? We're doing a double roll call, are we?
Yes.
Okay.
Ann Robin,
Here,
Georgiana Schuster,
here,
Sue Suter,
here,
Deb Roosh,
Here.
Gail Kennedy,
here,
Susan Fowler,
Here.
Joe Omosagie,
Here.
Kyle Patterson, Tom Moore,
Here.
Julian Rappaport,
Here.
Jane Sprandel, John Paul Joachim,
Here.
Kathleen Worth Couch, Elaine Plencia.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. So we'll approve the agenda.
I so move.
And Julian seconds. Okay. So is there do we need anything else other than that? So public participation, any comments? Going once. No comments? Okay. I am glad we're having this meeting with both boards together. I mean, it's a conversation that's supposed to be an ongoing conversation in the society that we live in, and I think we as board members in this county keep the conversation alive and well, and issues of race and mental health and developmental disabilities ought to be in the forefront. And I'm glad. Thank you, Chandra, for presented for us today. So Chandra, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, well, evening, everyone. Thank you all again for just being open to have this conversation. What we are going to be doing tonight is actually talking about just where we are as a board, just some decisions that were made. Some of you all were a part of those decisions, some of you all were not. And so I'm going to kind of give a more in-depth conversation about the historical perspective, and also invite you all to be open to filling in some of the gaps that things that you remember based on your perspective from the past or present. And then also we'll be offering some additional ways that we can continue to move forward through the future. In your board packet, I just kind of wanted to let you know the lengthy PowerPoint presentation that was in there. And I think I actually said that it is going to be for reference and training only. I provided you with the entire training PowerPoint so that you could see the kind of training that I have given organizations in the past to talk about the national class standards, ideas of implementation, ideas and strategies of why we do what we do. But as a board tonight, we are only going to deal with the standard and then talk about why the standard or the purpose of the standards, because I do not think any of the board members have actually been fully introduced to the national class standards. I also want to provide you with a historical perspective, and then also have a conversation about what would, as a board, in addition to what we are doing, can we strengthen and implement additional policies? So in addition to celebrating where we are, where we have been, we also can talk about just different ways of how we want to move forward. So in your board packet on page 3, if you would look at page 3, I provided you with a self-assessment checklist for cultural competency. This self-assessment checklist can be done in your own time. I would invite you to just think about it thoughtfully as you as an individual serving on the board. We do this with individuals, we do this with board members so that we can begin to see where our personal values are, where we actually are according to the items listed on this checklist. It actually came from and was adapted from the National Center for Cultural Competence at Georgetown University, but it has been updated and adapted to our community. Also, I have updated it as well to include so that it could be adapted for our organization as well. So in your time, I won't say your spare time, I would invite you to take some time to fill out this cultural competency checklist. Again, this is not exhaustive. And again, if you answer that you have done all the things, it does not necessarily mean that there are not biases present in your values or in your belief system. It just means that pertaining to these particular items, you are pretty aware of where you are in regarding cultural competency. Before I go on, are there any questions about the self-assessment? And if we were meeting in person and we were talking in a group, what we would actually do is just take some time to actually fill it out and process our thoughts behind the answers, and then actually invite you to contribute to a discussion about ways that you would, as a board member, begin to improve cultural sensitivity. Joe, I want to also make sure it's okay with you if we can have dialogue.
Oh, yeah, please. Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so to start the conversation, what I would like for us to do, if you don't mind, is just talk about just one way that as a board member, you could possibly improve cultural competency or sensitivity as a board member. And so because we are here, you can choose to pass, or you can choose to say, I want to pass, or you can choose to speak up. And so I'm going to go based on the order in which I see it on my screen. So Elaine, if you'd just like to share one way that you could improve cultural sensitivity as a board member, thinking about it from a personal perspective, or as just as a board, a member of this board overall.
Well, this is just off the top of my head. The first thing that occurs to me is that our meetings do not give any kind of recognition to a need to accommodate language or disabilities, or people who have trouble with attending the board meetings, even on Zoom. So it may be that we should begin board meetings by asking that question, or I don't know how to implement this, but we don't make any place for the fact that somebody might, citizens input might need an interpreter, or, or someone with a disability might need some kind of help attending or listening. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. That is really important, and I'm very glad that you pointed that out. Because one of the things that when we talk about cultural competency is moving into ways that we are going to remove barriers for people to participate. And so when we look at the standards for services and the appropriate services and supports for individuals, is that what are those barriers of participating? And so that was a great example of a barrier that could be addressed. So thanks for saying that. Joe, you're next.
Oh, I just piggybacking on what Elaine mentioned, that's something that I definitely think that we have not, even as a non-native English speaker, I sometimes did not think about it in context of the board meetings and in how we present information in the board. Yes, my mom and my father would have been able to understand it, but there are citizens in this community who utilize the services that do not understand or do not speak English as clearly. And there are people who need other kinds of services. And acknowledging those aspects within our meetings would be very important. And also, now that we're on all virtual, not everyone is competent in the virtual space. How do we get into that space where people who are not competent with the technology get to be a part of it? So we're missing out on aspects of the community. So yes, thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go to Georgina next.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on what Joe is talking about. And it seems like, I've only been on the board for a year now, and my first 2 meetings were in person. But since March, they have not been in person. And I have wondered since the beginning about the public coming to the meetings and whether we had hearing impaired interpreters or language interpreters for the general public. And so it seems like maybe we could do more towards that effect.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, Martha Moore is here, but I think that's Tom's.
I'd like to use her name as a disguise, but you all virtually doesn't work well. I guess one of the things I think about is, particularly with cultural competence, is I'd like to see us included more in the same way that we talk about stigma, and particularly because I think that we overlook the fact that stigma and the lack of cultural competence plays a big part in the kind of behaviors that we think we're treating. We're calling mental health issues, when in fact, if we were more conscious about this, those mental health issues might dissipate and not be as noticeable. And I think that stigma plays a major impact on who we identify as people in need of services. And I think it's absolutely critical for service providers to know that, so that they don't overinterpret the behavior that they see and quickly call it mental illness. And I think it's important for us as a board to place even more attention on the cultural competence and stigma that we apply to the people that we say we're delivering services from. And so let's not, I guess what I would like to do is not create a special class of people when we ignore doing either of those kinds of things.
Thank you for sharing that. And when we talk about the class standards, it actually talks about that, and the purpose of one of the standards actually addresses that. And we'll talk about that and why that standard is definitely important as well. So thanks for saying that. Board member Ann Robin.
Well, hello.
Hello.
Yes, we hear you.
I'm on. I've got the video going again. Maybe I'm one of those people that's less competent with the technology. I think the points that everyone has made are very good. It's, I guess I don't have a specific comment. If I come up with one, I certainly will suggest it. But I have been very, very happy with the fact that we have this as something that our board
is aware of all the time, that we have you, Chandra, as someone who's out in the community. And we don't want to make it just you because we should all be doing it. So I guess I would just say I need more help and support as to how to be out in the community and be a better ambassador for cultural competence. So thanks.
Okay, thank you for sharing. Deb Rush, do you have anything? Okay, I'm going to move to.
I just had to unmute myself, sorry.
Okay, that's
I
okay.
didn't have anything really specific to add. It's just I'm happy to be able to participate in this as a reminder and to build on the need to, to be aware of how various backgrounds, communities, cultures, abilities, how much variability, I guess, that there is, and how to be more aware and more tolerant of differences.
Okay.
Very clumsy, sorry for that. Yeah.
Oh, no, it is fine. Thank you very much. Next, Gail Kennedy.
I'm going to have to pass. I'm hoping that probably by the end of the meeting, I'll have something intelligent to say, but right now I don't. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Julian Rappaport.
Unfortunately, now the criterion is something intelligent. there goes what I had to say. I'm not exactly sure how to get this across. I do have one thing that I feel pretty confident about, but mostly I just don't exactly understand the target of this conversation. That is, are we talking about to one another as board members? Are we talking about to the agencies that we fund? Or are we talking about the county board that we are appointed by and have a relationship to, but never talk, at least as a group, about these issues to?
Sure. So the way that I couched it in the beginning, or the hope was thinking about you individually as a board member or a member of this board, and what could you do to improve, or any suggested ways that the board could think about it. And so when Elaine first spoke, she thought about as a board member and brought up the fact about accommodating people with that are living with disabilities. There hasn't been a space that has been dedicated to say, is this type of support and service offered for this? So she's thinking about that from a board member's perspective, and that's what she brought up. And others followed suit in the same way. And so again, it would just go back to you as a board member. What would you individually have to say that you could, or some ways you could improve as a board member, or think about it overarching?
Okay, so following from what you're saying, what I would say now is, I feel that as a board member, I should, every time we're looking at programs that we're going to fund, pay closer attention and in fact discuss with other board members, and it gets hard how publicly to do it. I guess you have to do it publicly. But I think we should be discussing the kind of data that you are collecting and presenting us with. So I've often thought that, well, look, I get these reports and I see, but I don't really know how that's translating into this organization in a real way. And I want to ask those questions. And I'd like that, if we're serious about it, to be a part of the way we come to decision-making about whether or not, or how to help, or somehow to put into public consciousness that this really matters. It's not just a piece of paper to be filled out.
Okay.
So that's what I think.
Thank you.
So like really focusing in and actually looking at and reporting on the values that that it's not just a piece of paper or something that's just done. It actually is being implemented and actually being done.
And taken into account by us when we decide about supporting a particular program.
Okay. Thank you for that. Susan, you are next.
I just really don't have anything to add. I think the accessibility issue, the outreach issue, and I think, and we've talked about this, I think the DD board, we'd like to see more diversity on the board.
Okay. Susan Fowler.
Well, I've been sitting here and struggling with how to put into words something that's related to what Julian said. It's the fact that in a given year, we look at maybe 30 program applications, could be up to 50, but we're fortunately doing some 2-year applications. And being really clear to what extent the issues that require support or funding from the board are issues that are embedded in structural racism. And by that, I mean, are they a result of housing inequities, policing inequities, access to food that have to be really highlighted and clarified? We're often putting Band-Aids through our programs on issues that go beyond the purview of the mental health board. And we know that. And our board's mission isn't to create an equitable society independent of all the other systems in our community. But I think we sometimes are in a good position to say that this is an important program because right now there are no other options in our county that are addressing this issue of homelessness. And that the issue of homelessness desperately needs to be addressed. We're taking a small part of it, but we recognize that it's often a result of cultural and income variables that reside in a lack of recognizing racism or policies that have been racist.
Thank you, Susan. Chandra, I think you're muted.
John Yuhakim, you are next.
So I think as a board, one thing that we should try to be a little more aware of for making sure we're meeting cultural competencies is just, I know when we speak to each other, we use a lot of different vocabularies and a lot of different words, and not everyone's educational understanding is different. So if we want the public to be involved in our discussions and not feel like intimidated, we have to make sure that, you know, we can have our discussions the way we want to have them, but at the end, if we're using vocabulary that's at a little higher education level, that we kind of, you know, just go over what we're talking about in more layman's terms for people that are listening, so that they can be involved in the discussion if they wish to be, or at least be aware of the information that's being passed along. Because as a medical provider, you know, there's a different way that I talk to a doctor or a nurse, and then there's a way I talk to a parent. And so it's a little harder as a board because we're talking to each other about things that are complicated, but at the same time, we need to simplify it for the public so they understand our decision-making process. And just realizing the education level of the public is different than the education level of board members and other people that are involved in the discussion, so that people don't feel intimidated to be involved in our discussion because they have just as much, you know, right to have input in this as anyone else. So that's just one thing that I would try to work at being better at. You know, the other thing is, you know, just making sure we have an environment where culturally diverse people feel welcome in contributing to the discussion, that they don't feel intimidated. I know there's a lot of debate that goes on typically between Julian and Tom, but I feel like there's a lot of agreement usually between the board members. And so there might be people that have a different perspective that might feel intimidated by the board if they have a different perspective to feel like they're welcome to contribute their perspective. So I just want to make sure that we allow people to feel welcome if they have a different opinion than our perspective. So those are just the things I would contribute.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for doing that. And so if we were together, what we would actually begin to do after this particular section, we would have been on a whiteboard and actually talking about just even next steps about what we will do. And so in the interest of time, we're not going to do that today, but because we have the recording and I've taken notes, there are going to be some things that we can definitely, as a board, and of course, after this, we can continue to develop. This is a journey. This is not a trip. There are aspects and destinations along our journey, but just really see this as a journey. It's ongoing and it's going to be constantly shifting and changing. And if we have foundationally what it is that we believe, and ultimately our mission is to create a system that is equitable, that meets the needs of the people within Champaign County that are having mental health challenges, that are experiencing substance use disorder, intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we are looking at creating that service system to ensure that there are no barriers to get quality care. That is what we can begin to look at overall and saying, okay, the decision that I make as a board member, is it pushing a barrier or is it removing a barrier? Is one way we can begin to look at how we move on our journey. Before I move forward, Gail, did you have anything that you wanted to say? And did you have anything that you wanted to say before I move forward?
Not yet.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I honored before we moved forward. So in your board packet, I'm kind of going through this just in some type of order so that we can have some discussion. I put this article, Healing America, a Funder's Commitment to Racial Equality. This is coming from the WK Kellogg Foundation, and this was actually written in the 90s when they began to talk about how the Kellogg Foundation as a funder wanted to begin to look at racial equity as a funder. And I brought this out because this was around the time when the Champaign County Mental Health Board began to actually look at how they wanted to begin to infuse cultural competency within their policies, within their procedures, and also invite people to have a cultural competency plan when they apply for funding. And one of the things that I wanted to, that jumped out at me is actually in the first line, is when in the paragraph where it says, the lesson is now clear. Without clear intention, coupled with creative strategies to influence perceptions, as well as unconscious racial biases and structures of opportunity, disparities and achievement gaps will not be closed. And so until funders begin to be intentional about those creative strategies of how well we want to dismantle the unconscious racial biases, structures of opportunity, disparities, it's not gonna go away. And so when I first got into this role, I remember looking at the cultural competency plans, and I actually have the very first cultural competency plans that were presented to the Mental Health Board. They were 20 pages long, literally. There were some that were a paragraph long. And in the 20 pages to the one paragraph, there was no accountability. There was no clear path of what people were going to actually do to begin looking at how can we close these disparities? How can we actually do the gaps? It was more so on the journey of, well, we want to make sure that we're welcoming. We want to make sure that we're inviting, but not actually putting teeth to it. And so our journey as a mental health board has basically put some accountability in place so that it can, I call it, not go down to the black hole of cultural competency, which is sometimes a file cabinet where it just goes deep, 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 never to be seen again. So thankfully, because of the work that the board has done, also by supporting a position, we have some clear things that are in place, and I want to show those to you all now. Okay, can you all see my screen? And this information is all in your board packet. For the sake of time, I did not, for the live presentation, we're not going to have all 58 of the slides in the presentation. We're just going to focus on the standards, as I stated earlier. So I believe it was September, I gave you all a snapshot of our CLC journey here at the Champaign County Mental Health Board. And when we first began to talk about cultural competency in the Mental Health Board, it was a mental health report from the Surgeon General that was released that actually talked about the stigma of receiving mental health treatment. In the last slide, there are resources that were listed. What I would like to encourage you to do is actually visit those resources, because there is an equity timeline that you can actually look at and see how the federal government began to look at equity as a country, and we begin to look at it from a federal perspective. So this snapshot here, and I'm not going to read everything, but I remember in 2005, around that time period, was when system of care values were actually starting to be introduced to, those values were introduced to our funding priorities, so that we could begin to see, okay, how will we put this into the community, not necessarily in traditional settings. Here is where we are, another snapshot of where we are. In 2012, up at this point is when the DD board actually began to co-fund our position and begin to actually say, you know what, cultural diversity is going to be something that we adopt as a value as well. And with that, they decided to also help fund the position of the CLC coordinator. One of the things that I do want you to know is that although the Mental Health Board and Developmental Disabilities Boards are in the same office, it was not always, it was separate requirements. So although the DD board presented CLC plans, they were not receiving the training and technical assistance that the mental health board was receiving prior to 2012. So I just wanted to let you know that if it seems like there may have been a gap, that was why. Do you have any thoughts about that, Lynn? Because you were the associate director at that time. Okay. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure that you were aware of as a board, these are the requirements that all cultural competency plans must address. They must address how their annual cultural competence training. They have to show evidence that they are recruiting a diverse board. They're looking at their workforce and not just race and ethnicity, looking at backgrounds and skill sets as well. One of the things that we have tried to do in looking at cultural diversity is not just looking at the appearance of diversity, because then that we can get into tokenism, but actually we look for people with diverse backgrounds with different skill sets that are needed. We also encouraged organizations within their plan to have a cultural competence assessment or do an individual assessment and evaluation. And that assessment that you took that is in your board packet is one that has been sufficient. And so one of the organizations do it on the off year. So 1 year they will do an agency or organization-wide cultural competency assessment. And then the next year they will do an individual evaluation or cultural competency assessment. Looking at their values and policies and procedure, and organizations actually go into detail in their cultural competence plan, talking about those values and policies and procedures. Again, it is around, for example, one of the things that they talk about is offering mental health days. There's one particular organization, they have the capacity to offer 5 mental health days in a year. There has to be no reason to call, no reason to say anything, but that is dealing with the wellness of an individual. Interagency collaboration, how to work together within an organization is also part of that. Language communication assistance. And then also they must match the actions with the appropriate class standards. So this is what, as a funder, you all require of the agencies that you're funding. This is the data that I am actually collecting on the 2nd and 4th quarters. So it's initially brought in with their application. And then on the 2nd quarter, they report their progress. And then the 4th quarter, they talk about all of their activities. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen real quick and just check in for any questions or any discussion about what I just shared with you.
I guess I'm sorry, maybe I should have raised my hand. This is Gail Kennedy. I guess one thing that struck me is, although you gather this information for us, I'm not sure that I'm using this information very effectively when I reevaluate the requests for funding that come back through us. I think maybe, being able to to look at this information and use it more effectively would be very valuable as growing as a board member and the decisions that I make. Just a reflection. Thank you.
You're welcome. Tom?
Well, Sandra, I just think that it's interesting to go back as far as the Surgeon General's report and the Carl Bell. Those first three documents that got us going in this direction. And when you talked about some of the earlier competency plans, it really, a big issue was that one of the reasons our clients, so to speak, were not so diverse, and there weren't very many African Americans, is this whole business of not feeling welcome. It wasn't tied to much more than that. And so part of when we got started with this was focusing on making those agencies feel like they had an open door policy. And when you compare that to what we are doing now, that we have made, the steps have been so much greater than just, do you feel welcome in our setting? But if you can for a minute suspend where we are now and just think about, that was a big step to get agencies and providers to say, oh, they don't feel welcome here? Then the answer is no, they don't feel welcome here. So what do we do about this? So we made a big jump from that to where we are now.
Yes, Elaine.
I just want to add, just following up on Gail's remark, that I really look at the CLC part of the application, and you can see differences, even though, Chandra, you've worked with all these agencies. I remember one where I looked at their CLC plan and I thought, this is just pro forma. They don't care. And as it turned out, that agency had other problems, and that was the canary in the coal mine for me. If they don't care about this, then they're not going to be caring about the granular part of the funding, perhaps. And it turned out to be true. They turned out to have real problems with their whole application. So I think that's really useful information. It's kind of the signal about depth of commitment,
Thank you for saying that, because so in my role, I actually read all of the application and pull out in the program plans those values, their policies and procedures. Like, that's where I look for it in the program plan, not just only their cultural competence plan. I actually look how responsive their applications are when I'm giving feedback to the board about reviewing that process. So thanks for saying that, because I am very intentional about reading those program plans as well.
That's good. Good.
Yes, Susan.
So when I'm reviewing the applications, I always check to see if you've approved their cultural plans, competency plans. And that, of course, is critical to anything that we do. But I don't remember very many times when and perhaps I'm not remembering, where you've raised concerns. So I assumed that if there was an application that really fell short on that, you would be sharing that with us when we're discussing the application or raising questions for the applicant to respond to.
So, and I'm glad that you brought that up. So when I say that cultural competence is a journey, I believe, like, in my role, I have journeyed with the organizations, because some of them just don't know. They don't know where to start. They don't know so they just start with somewhere. And so if you notice in the contract negotiations and our recommendations for approval, I have actually put in some of those recommendations. They will get technical assistance on updating their plan. So when you see that, that's usually your sign like there's trouble, without putting the trouble in public documents, because it also is a holistic process for them as well, because they are the ones that are serving the people. If they are disgruntled about serving the people, so I try to kind of keep it, I try to keep it relational, basically. Julian?
Yeah, you're a lot more tactful than I am, so thank goodness for that.
I'm also not as seasoned as you. It's coming though. You never know what's gonna happen. You know, in about 20 more years.
Seasoned, there's a nice neutral way to describe old, but what do I want to say? I never know, really. And maybe Elaine is just better at reading it than I am. I appreciated what she said. But I never really can tell whether what has been acquired is how to answer the questions on a form, because that's not that hard to do. If you pay attention to it, you can figure out what you should be saying. I never know how to translate that to understand whether this is actually, and I don't mean perfection. I would be happy with what they used to give me in elementary school. I always got I's for improving. That would be an okay grade. I kept telling my mother, I'm getting better, I'm getting better. So when the teacher was kind to me, she'd give me an I. But really, seriously, I never really know how to interpret it in terms of my own contribution to the discussion of this organization. I can't figure out how to translate the form to knowledge about what they're really doing. And I have to confess, it's partly because I'm pretty cynical about mental health services in general. I think there's a lot, I mean, just because they're run by people just like anybody else. And so it's a part of our social problem that we don't know how to deal with these kinds of issues very well. So I'd almost rather see organizations telling us, God, we're having a hard time with this. And I think I'd believe that more than I believe that, oh, we're being wonderfully diverse and sensitive and so on. It's just sort of, I don't believe it. And I'm not talking about anybody in particular.
So to let you know, like when they are filling out their forms, I know when they're not being. And so we have conversations. And so those conversations actually are happening. And some people have gotten angry with me. Some people have chosen not to interact with me. They've chosen to utilize someone else. I do know that when funding comes around, their program plans are different. So it doesn't have to be from me. I just want you to do better by the people that you serve. And the funniest thing that I'm working through now, and it's going to come in another training, is this whole idea of that cultural humility replaces cultural competence. That's not okay.
What's not okay?
It's not okay to replace cultural competence with cultural humility.
Please explain that term to me.
Okay, so cultural humility owns your own self-awareness around culture. Cultural competence is actually being able to effectively provide support services in cross-cultural and function effectively cross-culturally. Cultural humility is more of a self-reflective. Cultural competence actually has measures that you can perform that you are being culturally competent cross-culturally.
And I've seen quite a few places that would say they have cultural humility as opposed to being culturally competent. And I would say I've worked in some of those places too.
Go ahead, Tom.
Just that exchange you were having with Julian reminded me of another historical thing. When we first started this, we didn't have someone like Chandra, and so people just turned in their cultural competence. And it made a difference when we had someone who could be on the scene. But from the perspective of the board, what happened once we started paying attention to what we thought our providers were doing, we got a lot more proposals from small minority providers. Well, before we didn't get those. A lot of those went to the community mental health center. And all of a sudden, there was this sense that, hey, we could do this ourselves. We don't need to have these programs go through the community mental health center. So you had far more, even than we have now, small agencies that sprung up, and we were funding then. And I think that all came from the Surgeon General's report. It came from Carl Bell's visit, and then it came from the fact that we were saying we as a board needed to be more culturally competent, and that opened the gates for these small agencies to apply.
Thank you for sharing that. So, John, you're leaning in. I want to make sure I give you space if you have either some comments or feedback about what's been reported, and any other people that may not have had an opportunity to speak. I want to make sure that everyone gets space.
No, I mean, I didn't have any additional comments. I mean, I had something that's kind of a tangent from this, from the agencies that we fund. When I was reading the article that you put in the beginning of this, I was thinking, you know, as a mental health board, you know, it's not, we don't just fund agencies, but we're supposed to represent the county. Do we make sure that other government agencies in the county are culturally competent, like police, force?
Oh, come on.
I mean, other staff that are on the front line with the community. So any staff that's a government that is in a government, any government employee that's on the front line that communicates with the community should have cultural competency. And I was just wondering, do we reach out to those other branches of the government in our area to help them with that?
So that's where we are on the journey. If I can like tactfully say, it is improved. So in the beginning, we were very siloed. It was my time was completely dedicated to the mental health board and developmental disabilities boards, and that was it. What began to shift was the leadership began to challenge me to expand beyond. That is why, like, if you notice in my report, I'm in other community-based organizations, because there are oftentimes representation from other county departments that are there. And then they'll ask, like, hey, how come you don't do that for the whole county? And honestly, that they haven't made that a priority in their budget to incorporate it. Mental health board has, and the developmental disabilities boards has. So that is one reason. The second reason is it hasn't been a priority or a value in other departments that explicitly. I think that people stick within the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title 4, just to make sure they don't get a lawsuit. And that is just enough. Right now, there's a lot of things that are being shifted to say, okay, how are we really looking at this? And they're challenging the status quo. It's a lot of amazing things happening, but it's like a pull too, because you are still celebrating people's culture and their values as who they are. There are some people who fundamentally do not believe that people of color should have access to quality care. There are people that fundamentally, that's in them and they believe that. So because you're working with that kind of fundamental belief, that's a long time to change someone's thought process. So that's why I say it's a journey and where you are, because it's usually the people who are in decision-making positions have to begin to shift their thought process.
Mhm. I think from a medical perspective, like for us, we think of it as like quality of care that you provide. I think from a governmental perspective, it's the quality of service that you're providing the community. And so making sure you're culturally competent is ensuring that you're providing the highest quality of service to your own community, and making sure that that is an important pillar of the service you're providing. So I just hope that it starts to change, or that becomes kind of just ingrained in government, but it's probably going to be a slower pace than we want it to be.
Yeah, and if you think about if we think about the change that has taken place, Civil Rights Act was only 50 years ago. That's not a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So we just have to, that's why I say it really is a journey.
Yep, it is a journey. And I think over the last few years, we've had a few more instances where people consider cultural humility competence. I mean, and I think you can tokenize a lot of things going on within the community or within agencies without really changing anything. So I think competency is a journey, and it's got to take time. It's going to be not just my individual realization, but my organization's work towards competence all around.
Oh, I want to do a quick check-in. We have, I was told that I had an hour and a half, and so we're at 6:46. I do know that, Joe, we culturally like to end around 7-ish. Mm-hmm. And so I want to make sure that I am definitely respectful of the time, but I don't want to stop it mid. So there are some things I want to highlight before the end of the night, just so that I can make sure that we get the content done. And then let's talk about what, as a board, we can talk about next steps as far as an additional study session. I know, does this mean that we're going to start paying attention to, again, you already are collecting information based on what you all are requiring through your benchmarks. Do you want those to change as a decision-making board? Do you want to see things highlighted more? Do you want to see things shift? And so I'd like to talk with you all about that if possible. But I'm going to go back to sharing my screen, back to one of the major things that I changed in the reporting was I actually changed the second quarter progress report to where they actually had to report on the sections of the national class standards. So they actually had to summarize their sections outlined in their CLC plan. That is where I have gotten some very clear descriptions of what people are actually doing. I condensed the second quarter reporting to more practical things for that reason that you speak of, Julian, so that you can see how is it being applied. So in the annual cultural competence training, I actually asked them, okay, what trainings have happened in the first quarters, and they'll tell me who and what. Their governance, leadership, and workforce, they actually talk about under those particular standards, what they're actually doing in those particular areas, and specifically showing me. They tell me either if they have or have not done their cultural competence organization assessment, and they'll actually say, we need help and assistance with this. The language and communication assistance. So this is a big one, because there are some organizations that do not have the capacity to even offer bilingual services because they can't afford the interpreters. Because I've talked to them about the importance of not having their children and other family members being an interpreter. That's just the English language. But also, how do we communicate with people that change their numbers, their phone numbers every week? How do we stay in contact with them? Looking at slang, how do we talk about acronyms? Just all of those things are coupled under there. And so the organizations have given me a pretty good description about their progress, their engagement and continuous quality improvement, and how they're being accountable to that. So it's not just going into the Black cultural competence hole. It really is putting a person responsible for doing particular actions. Who's going to follow up? So all of that is there. And then looking at the principal standard, which is the principal standard from cultural competence. And I included that in your board packet as well. I wanted to give you this kind of view of the states that actually have a cultural competence requirement. And I wanted to show you that Illinois is one of the states that have mandatory cultural competency funding requirements. So it is not just Champaign County Mental Health Board. The state of Illinois has actually required that there is cultural competency plans, and we actually did it first. And so we were able to help them kind of implement it and say, okay, here is what we want to focus on. Their focus was linguistic competence first before they did cultural competence, because they were knowing that language access and communication was the largest barrier. So I just wanted to make sure that you were informed about that. Again, as I said, these are reference slides that talk about the history of the national class standards, meaning the National Culturally and Linguistically Appropriate Services Standards. When I first started this role in 2008, when I was contracted in a community-based organization, is when I actually found the class standards, and they actually were only applied to medical providers when they first started. And so when they first started, it was just for medical providers. What I also learned, we were funding a medical provider. They did not know about the class standards. So I introduced them to Promise Healthcare. When they enhanced the class standards, this infographic kind of shows how they looked at it, looking at health overall, not just healthcare only. So they looked at the health, addressing the mental, social, spiritual, and physical well-being. And it looked at to advance the health equity and improve the quality so that we can begin to eliminate health disparities. And so they talked about it in more depth. They actually talked about implementation and also talked about why it was important that they had the particular standards. When the standards first began, there were only 13, and then it increased to 15. So you have all of these slides in your folder, in your board packet. And so you can go back and review each of the standards. But I wanted to make sure that standard 1 is the principal standard, which is to provide effective, equitable, understandable, and respectful quality care and services. This is what I tell all the organizations. If you have any issues, go back to what you can stand on. If you are providing supports and services, training, you're looking at all aspects of the culture within your organization. If it's not effective, equitable, understandable, respectful, and has quality, you need to go back to the beginning, is basically how frankly I have put it. And so everyone should be able to feel like their culture is being responded to, it's appropriate, there is great there's great communication, and also it looks at eliminating discrimination and disparities from the very beginning. And in your reference PowerPoint, it talks about the components of it and also different strategies and ways you can implement that. Standard 2, this is where it deals with advancing and sustaining governance and leadership that promotes class and health equity. Again, this is ensuring that there are resources actually available to provide culturally responsive support and services. Oftentimes what happens is that they think about cultural competence and the resources for it as aside from, instead of thinking about it with and. And so this standard actually allows for the leadership to say, okay, can this be a part of how we govern and how we are going to sustain? Being a model of appreciation and respect for different backgrounds and inclusion, and then also support a model of being transparent and the communication between who's being served as well as who is actually providing the services. So in the interest of time, I am going to kind of breeze through this and just kind of let you know again about the standard 4 in particular, educating and training the governance, leadership, and workforce and class. Board members, this is you all's first time. You all have been so kind to say, oh, Chandra, you all have let me do this. But when I talked to Lynn, I said, I don't think that I've ever actually done an orientation to the national class standards. And so what I've offered trainings for the service providers, but for the board members, I wanted you all to have those documents that I have been giving to organizations to bring them up to speed. And if the leadership doesn't know that this is happening, there is barriers for implementation. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just, again, let you all know that all of the implementation and the strategies, the standards are within your board packet. And I encourage you to go through this. And if you don't mind turning to page 73 in your board packet, this is an actual, this was developed maybe about 2 years ago in response to what an implementation checklist could actually look like for different organizations. And so I have shared this with the agencies. because there were some who it was still like going way over their head. So what I chose to do was I look for resources that can continue to make it easily understandable. If they still don't understand it, I'm gonna continue to walk with them. I'm gonna continue to find ways to make sure that it's easily understood. I had one situation where it was a very hostile training environment. Like, it was like I got like accused and pointed the finger, the whole bit. And they called me during the pandemic to thank me for actually introducing them to cultural competence, and thanked me for all of the training. They said, I was a slow learner, but I got it. And so it's those types of things that are actually happening with the agencies that we're funding. But what they're doing is they're removing barriers for people to actually access the services that they are providing, not just who they feel that they should or should not reach or touch. So they're moving it and breaking those barriers. So it is 6:59, and so I want to make sure that bringing this conversation to a close, I want to answer your questions. Is it clear on what we are receiving from the organizations, that it is sufficient? Is there something else that you would like to know? And also, if there is something else that we're not reporting on, what would you like possibly to learn about from the agencies in their cultural competence journey?
I'll have to think about that.
Okay.
I will.
Lynn?
I would be interested to learn about how they're doing with communication and language assistance, because our experience with those short little expo events, virtual events, has been, it is quite a feat to find translators and interpreters, even for an event that's scheduled really far in advance. So I wonder how our community is doing with that when we're talking about services which might be needed in a crisis or an emergency, especially. I mean, I think we know a little bit about low capacity for some language services, but otherwise, how are they doing with ASL, for example, or other supported communication? I'd be interested in that, just because we've gotten into that. It's very expensive and very hard to find people, as far as we can tell. So I might want to borrow their people.
You have volunteers, a list of volunteers?
No.
Has anybody developed one?
That doesn't happen. Not ASL, at least. They will not work for free.
Well,
and that's the other piece that we have to even think about shifting our thought process on, is not thinking about it from a free labor or people giving of their time. This is their expertise. We should value their contribution and their expertise and be able to support them.
Yeah.
And make the investment.
Is there a way to pull resources? Like, I mean, hospitals have, like, they call it Stratus, which is basically they can just call a number and they will get any interpreter, whether it's Pashto or Spanish or Conjubal or American Sign Language. They have that capability. Is there a way for all the groups in the county to, like, can you serve this many people, you need to contribute this many dollars a month to get this service, and it's all pulled together to provide that interpreter service for their group organization?
So John, just to let you know that was when we had a system of care in Champaign County. When we were funded, we actually utilized the same services that the hospital used, which was Pacific Interpreters at the time. And we polled our resources within the county. Where the barrier was in orienting was the service providers did not know how to do a triad interview, because what they didn't understand was that they're not there to translate for you. It's like they are speaking to the person. They're still talking to that person. This person is just their voice, because you can't. And so just getting them oriented on, you still need to maintain contact. You still need to maintain the relationship and the rapport, because that client is, and it was a huge barrier just in that triad interviewing process and orienting people on that the interpreter was really just the voice to ensure that the information communicated could be heard. Yes, Lynn.
So I know that Kayla has her hand up, but there's an interesting response in the chat already from an agency about, you know, some good news along this line. So thank you, Nicole, but I think also someone else, I'll be quiet, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that in some ways services have become more accessible because of virtual. And I also hope that means that we're thinking really creatively about the lessons we've learned during this time moving forward. But as someone who provides services to K through 12 students in the community, and even from what I've heard from my colleagues at RACES, it is very difficult to find qualified and licensed interpreters, and particularly with our level of, you know, absolute privilege and confidentiality in the state of Illinois, it's very difficult to find folks who have the qualifications to have these conversations. And the financial component, and even just the accessibility, like John, I was blown away when you said you have conjugal translators, because that is like a huge.
That one is the hardest one, actually.
Yeah.
I think the person doesn't actually speak it. They speak a different dialect.
Yeah.
Well, it's like only in this area. And it's like, I forgot how many, it's like tens of thousands of people speak it worldwide. It's not many at all.
Yeah. But we've been in, you know, health classes in high schools, and half of our students were trying to use a teacher as an interpreter who only speaks Spanish, and trying to get these conversations across. So I think that, in my biased opinion, as one single service provider in this area, trying to think of ways that we can, you know, combine our capacity to create a better system for folks all across the county, because we would love to be able to access and utilize those services. And there's only, you know, 7 people in my office. So we can only do so much at the end of the day, unfortunately.
Right. Julian, did you want to say something?
I don't think, am I on? I don't think at this point I have anything to add to the conversation. Thank you.
Your microphone was off, and so I was just making sure. Any feedback, Elaine?
No, I've just enjoyed this a lot. There's so much more for us to do here, but we got to think about it. I think, at least I do.
I think we've just scratched the surface. I mean, I think it's something that as a community, I mean, I'm thinking of not just what we do on the board, but there are so many different parts of the community that this kind of competence is necessary. You know, if we are going to progress in any way, we have to be competent. I mean, racism is a mental health issue. And in order for us to be competently providing services, this is something that is necessary. And I applaud you.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll change my mind and say something here.
Go ahead, Julian.
If I may. There was a particular part of that first article that you gave us to look at, in which the author said, and I can't remember the exact words, but it was essentially that the foundation that she represents, which is a funding organization, came to a kind of epiphany in which they saw themselves as wanting to become, by intention, an anti-racist organization. And that she was speaking about the need to have a vision and a clarity about that. And it did occur to me when I read it that the mental health board could have a similar vision. But I am a little bit unclear as to what our, I guess if we were talking in what our portfolio is. That is, we could speak and organize and work toward being that kind of an organization and help the county to provide that vision. But it's not clear to me that we actually have that as a mission that's been granted to us. So so there's a big difference between how we carry out our activities based on what we see as our vision and as our, not just our vision, but our legitimate domain. So is our domain working with mental health programs, or is it working with the community more generally and with the county and the representatives of the county? Because I think we would do somewhat different things based on how we understood that. Lynn probably knows what we're supposed to do.
This is actually a question with a technical side. This is a budget question. You want us to pay Chandra Somerville to train the whole community in cultural competence. She'd absolutely be able to do that. And I think a lot of organizations and governmental units trust her and would invite her to do that, but you'd be paying for it. So far, since I've been the director, I have not had the impression that that was the purpose of us having a CLC coordinator. My impression was the focus was to help improve the system of services for people with mental health conditions and starting with the funded agencies. So I think this is a great question. And it does come up between us in just some of our everyday circumstances. Some of the collaborations we're involved with bring this question to us, but we've tried to stay true to the mental health board and the DD board, that this is your money. And the direction that I've received from board members so far has been, this should be focused on our agencies. So if we should change course.
We will start with the agencies and we can grow. This is part of a larger conversation that we can have.
It's a great question.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is a great question.
I think the direction I think people might want to go is the next step that's kind of in the middle is discussing with branches of our community that of our government and the community that provide mental health care in some way, so I mean, everyone thinks the police because they do provide mental health care, they respond to mental health issues. So I think that might be like a low-hanging fruit.
How about education?
And education.
They provide behavioral health too.
So I think, we have to kind of start wrapping it up, but I think definitely this is the conversation where we can all really start looking at our community and not just the intergovernmental agencies and the mental health agencies, and how do we become a culturally competent community? And how do we not just say we have cultural humility, but be competent? Because I keep going back to that, because I have worked with so many places that individually people say they have the humility, but the agency doesn't show that. So, Chandra, anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, so this is I don't want to add anything. I just want to, thank you for the opportunity to be able to present the information. And then also just let you know that I am one person. I'm an army though, and I believe that I am a warrior in the army. And I also am recognizing that there are limits just with a single point of view. And so thinking about it from not just Chandra doing it, but what type of structure would the system be willing to create to focus on, because it's different levels of it, and definite like partnership and collaboration, because there's the not-for-profit, there's the business sector, there's the social sector. And thankfully, because of the work that I have been allowed to do in the community through the mental health board, I am touching a lot of these different places. They just not getting it all from me because you all have the investment.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for all that you do, the army of one, the army of Chandra. So it's, I mean, it's a start that we'll go into the new year. Hopefully with a vision of how we will look at our fundings and funding for the agencies that we fund and also the community at large. Are there any announcements, board announcements to be had? So we might get to end 1 minute early if there are no announcements. So do we need to move to adjourn? Who's gonna?
So moved.
Okay. All in favor?
Yeah.
Hey. So have a wonderful rest of the year, and hopefully you come back into the new year rejuvenated, filled with energy, and be safe.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Chandra.
you, Chandra.
Thank you, Chandra. Everybody have a good night, okay?
Okay.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.